the idea behind 50 interviews is you go out and interview 50 people that are doing whatever it is that you aspire to do. What I've done is I've taken it to the extent of an actual book, and what the book allows you to do is get in front of people that you otherwise would have probably never gotten in front of. It also forces you to really get some structure around doing these interviews. You're respecting now the person that you interviewed in the sense that you're taking that interview and making it available to anyone who's interested in that topic. So again, it's taking the idea behind doing an informational interview one step further, and out of respect for the person you interviewed, sharing their story with whomever is interested.
That sounds like a really amazing process. So talk to me about before you met with someone new, what kind of preparation did you do?
So for people doing the other interviews, we sat down and we discussed the questions that they want to ask. First of all, people that are drawn to this project are very passionate about something in particular, and they want to find a way to pull that passion to make it more part of their everyday life. The trick is really the questions, and only somebody who's really passionate about something is going to come up with the questions that really grab the reader. So we sit down and we go through questions. I have about 100 questions in a pool that we can pull from, but it's really coming up with relevant questions that somebody who's aspiring to become would want to know, or that somebody's involved in that industry or that field would want to know from their peers. That's really step one, and step two is starting to come up with a list of people that they want to interview. Now, some people come to me and say, well, Brian, I only know like 10 people, for example, 50 photographers. I only know like 10 well-known photographers that I'd want to interview. Well, the secret in all this is at the end of the interview, you ask, is there anyone else you think I should interview? And you always get 3 or 4 names. And before you know it, you'll have 50 plus. So it's not going to be a problem of finding people to interview.
How did you, so it sounds like asking the right questions is very important, but how did you keep that conversation going in the context of an individual interview?
Well, the questions, there would be a general question, then there'd be some clarification that would go along with that. The questions are relevant. That's how the person you're interviewing knows that you're really interested, and there's a lot of admiration that you have for what they're doing because you're somebody who's already knows the questions to ask. The magic in all this is asking questions that uncover new truths, and that's what I hope people find out is, and every author has found something different. Don with the 50 Athletes Over 50, he's discovered something that he could have never imagined. He's calling it the 50,000 Athlete Challenge, where he now realizes that these athletes he's interviewing haven't been to the doctor in years. He's like, these people aren't like the rest of us. They don't go to the doctor. So he's really now drawn to, seeing if he can really adopt this and to help solve a lot of the healthcare problems for an aging population that these athletes have discovered because they don't go to doctors anymore. For me, the alternate title for 50 Entrepreneurs would have been, it's not about the money. So it's about questions that tend to pull together a common message.
So when you talk about insights like that, are you typically, like in the actual process of interviewing the person, are you trying to process all that information in real time?
No,
or does that insight come later?
It does. There are things that you don't even hear during the interview. You record the interview, and then you go back later, and after we get it transcribed, you edit it down for content, and that's really the key. Nobody wants to read an hour-long interview word for word. There's 1 or 2 insights that come from every interview, but to have to sit through and read through a 20-page interview to get those insights is not respectful of the person who's reading the book. So the magic comes in when you actually take that interview and you condense it down into a readable interview that's really condensed to 3 to 5 pages, where all you're doing is really capturing the highlights. What that forces you to do is put yourself in the shoes of the person you interview. And it's an amazing process because you really now listen in a whole new way because you're being put in a position to have to explain this to another person, and you really grasp the information. So that's a very vital part of the process.
What questions that you asked or some of your other authors have asked have driven the deepest insights?
Well, my favorite question easily in my book was, and I have every author ask this question, is what would it say on your tombstone? And all the questions lead up to that very last question. And that's the title of the interview. And it's just an amazing thing when you grasp that. And what I'm doing now with the 50 professional speakers is there's very little hesitation to that answer. They know. The entrepreneurs, they had to think on it a little bit. There was some, that answer didn't come right away. They don't do as much self-respect or whatever. whatever the word is there, like these professional speakers do. I mean, these professional speakers can articulate it, and they've all basically nailed it every time I came to that question. So that's one that certainly uncovers, something that's powerful. Biggest challenges is a good one. Biggest rewards, to really get them back to the core of what drove them into what they're doing in the first place, and kind of what keeps them going. It's interesting, the 50 professional speakers, it's not the money, it's the feedback they get from the audience that they speak to, as an example.
What questions did people have the most trouble answering? You touched on one of them with what would it be on your tombstone, but were there other questions that people typically struggled with?
Where they hesitated to answer the question, not too much. I send them the question in advance so they can think about them a little bit. I think one that in the interviews I did is, what makes a good employee? Your rock star employees. There was a little bit of thought there. They weren't exactly able to pinpoint that at first, but at the end, after we talked about it and got some clarification in the question, they all came back to the exact same thing, and it was passion. The rock star employers have a passion for the industry and a passion for the business. So that was one where I'm not sure everybody put their finger on it in the beginning, but they certainly agree with me once that came out.
Anything else that I didn't ask that you want to share today?
It's the thing I leave with everyone I speak with is, if you're not where you want to be in life, surround yourself with people who are. If you want to surround yourself with 50 people, come talk to me, because I'd like to put those in a book and make that available to anyone. And the big epiphany I had after finishing the first book was becoming an entrepreneur was something I always wanted to do, but for some reason I had never done that. I'd never made that step. I couldn't make that decision because it was in conflict with my beliefs. My beliefs were that of an employee, not of an entrepreneur. Once I surrounded myself with 50 entrepreneurs, guess what? My beliefs started to change, and then my decisions started to change. And all of a sudden, I woke up one day and I was an entrepreneur, and that was, the big epiphany I had is I don't think we're truly in control of our moment-to-moment decisions. I think our beliefs are. So if you're not making decisions that are putting you where you want to be in life, look at your beliefs and see if they're still serving you. And if they're not, maybe you need to be open to some new beliefs.
All right, and if somebody's interested in getting involved with 50 interviews, what do they do?
It's easy to remember, 50interviews.com, 50interviews.com, and you can download an excerpt of the book. You can find out about how you can get involved as an author and see the other titles that are coming out.
All right, well, thank you so much, Brian.
Thanks, Lori.